Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Viper Pit. This is episode 1. I am here with Tim Frick and Michael Frogley. How's it going, guys?
Good, thanks.
Great.
Good to hear. Good to hear. So, just to start off, for each of you respectively, can each of you talk about your journey into the sport of wheelchair basketball?
Sure, go ahead, Mike.
I'll going to defer to you as the elder statesman between the two of us.
Well, my introduction to wheelchair basketball actually was as a member of the Big Block fraternity. Well, it's not really a fraternity, I suppose. As a member of the Big Block Club in at UBC, we hosted at the War Memorial Gym a game between the oh gosh, who was it? Sacramento and the Vancouver Cable Cars. And of course, the gym, this was 1975, so the gym was not accessible. So they needed a bunch of guys from the various teams, and I was on the men's volleyball team at the time, and to sort of help, I guess, pick up guys in chairs and carry them up the stairs to the playing court, and then take them sort of the reverse route afterwards. So kind of got to meet a few of the guys like Pete Plistro and Gene Reimer at the time, and then through a mutual friend met Rick Hansen. He was a volleyball guy before his injury, so we had some friends in the volleyball circles. And you know, when I met Rick, he was standing up on his with his braces and crutches, and I didn't really sort of, I just assumed he had like a sprained ankle or something. I didn't really sort of pay much attention. A year later, he was down at university working for BC Wheelchair Sports, organizing some events, and I was working at the university, sort of on the university side, the facilities. Went to a meeting, and here's this guy, and I look at him, and I sort of think, God, that guy looks familiar. And he starts talking to me like he knows me, and he starts recruiting me to coach wheelchair volleyball. and anyway, he was pretty persistent, as you can well imagine. And I started coaching wheelchair volleyball, started playing wheelchair basketball, and then coaching track, obviously, and marathoning. So from there, it just sort of built, and I had a pretty good career, I reckon, coaching athletics and the local wheelchair basketball guys. And I'd sort of retired once in the late 80s. I thought, having coached, guys like Rick Hansen and Terry Fox, I could probably rest on my laurels, but then I got a call from MJ Waugh saying the women's national team could use some coaching help. This was in the winter of '89, or December of '89. So somehow got roped into that. Said I'd stay for a year, turned the program into a positive, sort of forward moving kind of program, because it had sort of been stalled for a while. And next thing you know, it wasn't until 2009 that I finally got to retire officially from that role.
Very interesting. All right, Michael, what about you? What was your journey like into the sport?
Well, when I got introduced to the sport when I was in rehab. The local club, the Ottawa Royals, had heard there was this young kid who played some high school basketball that had recently been injured. And so one night, Eddie Katrowski, who was a class 1 on their team, his wife, Linda, actually played for Tim and was a mainstay of Tim's teams through all their success. Eddie came up to my room and he said, "Hey, would you like to, I heard you played some basketball. Would you like to try wheelchair basketball?" And so I said, "Oh yeah, sure. I'll try it. I'm pretty much game for just about anything." And I went down into the gym in the rehab center that night. And I'd never seen or heard of wheelchair basketball up till that moment. And I was a classic gym rat before this. I was the one that was the first one in the gym. I was the one that got kicked out of the gym late at night by the janitor, who wondered how you got in to begin with. That was me. And I got down there on the court and I started, playing and shooting around, and I hated it. I hated it. It was because I couldn't make a basket. I couldn't even get the ball to touch the net. And I mean, physically touch the bottom part of the mesh as it's hanging down. I don't mean couldn't make a basket. That was horrible. And I was like, forget it. I'm going to have to figure out something else to do. And so I thought, well, if I can't play basketball. I'll start coaching. So I asked if I could help out my at my old high school. My high school coach said, "I'll do you one better, Frog. You can take over." And I'd never coached or anything, so of course I thought I can do this. You know, Tim knows me really well. I don't really think a lot sometimes about some of the steps that I take. I just take them. And I quickly learned how much I had to learn. And so I started working on, I guess, understanding how I could be a better coach. And in the process of that, I was on the basketball court all the time with these kids, and it was like having an itch you've got to scratch. And eventually I just decided one day, a couple years later, it's the spring of '88, I decided I'm just going to get back into playing basketball, and went back to the old asphalt courts that I grew up on, started shooting around, called up the Ottawa Royals, asked if there was a, when they practiced, and they told me what nights they were, and I went out, and I got a chance to meet some great mentors, Reg McClellan, Denny LaPalme, Jimmy Enright, a whole bunch of them, Angelo Gavalucci, all these guys, and of course Linda and Ed Katrowski as well. Great mentors that taught me a lot, and they began to talk about the possibility of maybe going on and representing Canada. And so one thing led to another, and I ended up making the team that went to Barcelona in '92, and I played there, and then had a great experience, but then decided because of other things going on in my life tied to my education that I was going to step down after Barcelona. And I was still finishing off my degree at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. And they had their coach had just stepped down, Ron Likens, who's currently the coach of the U.S. men. And so they need somebody to fill in at the last minute, literally like it was in November, the season had started. I was doing a grad assistantship at the time that was involved, that basically was just photocopying and collating for those people who are old enough to remember photocopying and collating. And it was really boring. And they said to me, "Well, Frog, we'd like you to come and coach the team here for the rest of the year, and we'll cover your tuition and give you a stipend." And I said, "So you mean I don't have to photocopy and collate? I just have to coach basketball?" They're like, "Yep, that's it." And I was like, "Sign me up." So I was like, thought this is a great way to pay for my master's degree. At the end of the year, they thought I'd done okay. And actually, I think more to the point, they couldn't find anybody else to coach. So they kept me on. And like most things, and this is an interesting kind of point, I always want to find a way to get better at things. I don't want to just sit where I am. And so I actually, it was around that time that I actually called up Tim. And I want to say it was the winter of 1995. And I wanted to get better, and I knew they were going to be coming up to their tryouts and stuff like this. So I called and getting ready for the Paralympics in '96. And I called up Tim. I said, "Tim, I'm really interested in helping out the team. Is there anything I can do to help out?" And Tim said to me, "Well, I need a couple of things, Frog. I need somebody who's really good at technical skill instruction, and somebody who's really, really good at scouting and video analysis." Well, right off the bat, of course, I said, "Tim, you just described me. That's it. That's exactly me." And little did he know at the time that I was actually horrible at scouting, and I could just barely handle a remote control. So I quickly had to learn those things too. And so I got a chance to drive to Saskatoon, and it was right after CWBLs in '95, and Tim pulled me aside. He said, "So, Frog, just so you know, we'll see how you go through the course of the week, and if you do a good job, maybe we'll see if there's a spot for you." And I'd literally driven like for 26 straight hours. I laid down. I had about an hour of rest before this is what Tim told me, and then we got on the court. So went through the whole week, and at the end of the week, Tim decided that that I had something that I'd be able to make a contribution to the team in some small way. In other words, I don't think I'd fallen asleep the whole week. That was probably the key statistic there. But I got a chance to go with Tim and the women's team to Atlanta in '96. That was my first experience as a coach on an international team and as an assistant coach. I learned a tremendous amount from Tim. Like I watched Tim, the way he managed and organized everything, and how he understood how all the different parts fit together. I remember he was at a time when a lot of the teams, particularly on the Paralympic side, were just showing up at the Paralympics to play. Tim actually had different elements of sports science and sports medicine already involved. I remember him sending out a whole bunch of cassette tapes to us that we were to use to help learn how to do relaxation and visualization. And I used all of those getting ready for the event. So I learned a ton from Tim during that event, and I was fortunate to be part of a gold medal winning team. After that, I got a chance to, I was presented with the opportunity to take the men's team to Sydney in 2000. And of course, I jumped into it. I was just young at the time. And so I said, of course, I'd love to do that. And I was very fortunate to be part of some great men's teams that continued to build on the traditions that Tim established with our women's program. And I got a chance to coach the men through till 2008 with a hiatus in the middle there to get married and begin a family. And then I'm back in Canada now to help, build our academy and build the pathway so that we can continue to have a system that builds on the successes that really began, with Tim way back in the 90s.
Definitely. And both stories are both different, and so many big names you guys both mentioned, like a lot of the legends that played for Canada that I'm born in 92, but I've done a lot of my research, and it's just fascinating how much it's grown. Like the success may not be as emulated, but it's definitely, you see a lot of the original stuff and game plans and stuff implemented today. And then Chris and I were actually chatting about that, how, it's really evolved, and that's where we're doing this Viper Pit, just to, showcase some of the Canadian talent and coaches that are basically legends to the current generation. So you talked about the Canadian team. So Tim, I'll start with you. So you coached the women's national team in the 90s, and you guys won 3 golds in a row at the Paralympics from 1992 to 2000, as well as 4 world championships, which is quite the accomplishment. Can you just talk about some of your most cherished memories, Tim, from your time in the 90s with the women's team?
Yeah, I guess, I guess we had a pretty tremendous core group. I should have probably written everybody's name down so I don't sort of forget, but, Mike's already mentioned Linda and, of course, Chantal Benoit. So, when I came into the program in 1990, there was a really strong, keen, committed core. And at the time, I think Reg McClellan was, I think he might have just been finished his time in with the Alberta Northern Lights, building that program and really promoting the sport, and then off to Ottawa to run the national program. And so, we had a wonderful core of individuals, and so I think the other thing that we kind of did, I suppose, was we sort of looked at the game more holistically, because I figured, most of the other teams in the world, physically, some of them are going to be a little better. Maybe we're going to have an edge here or there, but most of they will. I figured technically, we probably didn't have the development program that we have now, actually, which is really fantastic. And thanks to Frog, of course, for spearheading that. But so I figured tactically, maybe we could be a little tricky, a little bit clever. I came from the stand-up sort of game background, and really love the creativity of planning things. So thought that maybe we might be able to get an edge there. But one thing I knew for sure was that probably no teams in the world were doing any kind of mental training, and I don't think they were doing goal setting or visualization or any types of the various types of imagery that we were doing, the relaxation, the breathing, all that sort of focus control, use of cue words, etc. And I figured, we could just knock it out of the park on that side of the sport, and that would make up for any sort of areas where the other teams might have an advantage, both physically and technically. So, we went into 1990 World Championships. I think we had in '88 in Seoul from the 4th place. We ended up playing the Dutch team again, who had some great players, and somehow managed to to eke out a victory for the bronze, and then really never looked back until our next bronze, which was in 2004. And you know, when we recovered into 2006 again, you know, getting the gold there. I mean, those are incredible sort of memories. And you know, we were such, you know, besides the mental side of things, like individually, we also had sort of a group kind of a mentality and did a lot of work on our group cohesion. And you know, we had our share of ups and downs in terms of personalities and so on, but we really worked hard to create a group or a family. And you know, some of the, you know, as nice a guy as I like to think I am from time to time, I think we did such a good job of creating that family feel that when it came time for someone to maybe not be on the team anymore for a variety of reasons, maybe there was better players that came along, or maybe a better mix that came along, that some of those decisions were terribly heart-wrenching from my perspective, but I'm not really the one that was affected by it. And so some athletes have had really some devastating news over the years, and you know, I don't get Christmas cards or anything, but you know, hopefully they will remember the good times we had together and the wins and the successes that we shared, and the focus that we had on the process rather than the outcome.
Exactly. And I think that's the hard part about being a coach and just on the coaching staff, is sometimes some people that are you're really good friends with just get cut, and it is hard. But like you say, chemistry is what it's all about. And sometimes people's feelings get hurt and they get left off, and it's just a part of the game. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. It is a hard decision, but it is what it is. You got to do what you got to do. You only have so many players you can have, and that's it. So Tim, or sorry, Mike, Tim, I already got to you. So you were the men's coach, the national team in the early 2000s. So you won 2 gold medals in 2000 and 2004, as well as world championship gold in 2006. What are some of your cherished memories with your time with the team?
So it's interesting. One of the things that it's always, you get asked this kind of question as if there's a singular moment. And there's certainly moments that stand out, but I don't think there's ever a singular moment. And it's because of one of the things that Tim just mentioned. It's because of the process. It's because you see the whole as opposed to just a gold medal. But there's some things that I always use that always remind me of lessons I've learned. And interestingly, one of them is '96 when we won the gold medal in Atlanta with the women. One of the moments I always talk about it. I talk about that being such a tight team, and Tim just mentioned it. And an example for me of how tight that team was, we were in the locker room after the game was over, and we're sitting there in the locker room, and I'm on the left side of the door, and there's one of our athletes on the right side of the door, and that athlete pops open a bottle of champagne and hands it around for each person to take a sip as it went around. And so it got all the way around to me, and I got the last sip, and I took it, and there was just enough of a sip in there. And I thought that's a team that each person along the way knew exactly how much to drink so that their teammates could all be part of it. I always had that, you know, stick out in my mind as indicative of how well that team played together and understood how to play for each other. In 2000, it was a young team. It was a young Pat Anderson, a young Joey Johnson. And it was a group of guys that wasn't actually, people thought that they could be pretty good, but didn't really think they could win the gold. And they did. And I'm always reminded of that they believed what others didn't. And that's what was important. In 2004, what I love about that team and is actually not really the tournament itself. It was a moment before the tournament, after we'd had selection. All the guys were sitting in a room, and they'd each been handed their jersey and a ball. And when we asked each one of them what they wanted the goal to be, their goal, as they went around and they described it, they didn't describe winning a gold medal. what that group of guys described was winning the gold to such an extent that the discussion was really going to be about who was going to win the silver. That the gold was a foregone conclusion, and that was an unbelievable team with a Joey Johnson, a Pat Anderson in his prime, Richard Peter Bear in his prime, Jamie Borisov, Chris Stoutenberg. I can go down the list. Unbelievable. The second best team in the world that year were the next 5 guys on our roster. It was an incredible group. And then in 2008, it was actually, in a way, it was redemption. Even though we didn't win the gold, we got a chance to play the U.S. in the semifinal, and we had been upset by them in 2002, and in double overtime, in an amazing game that the U.S. came out on top of. That game hurt, but it was a moment when all of us learned about ourselves. That made us better. We grew from that to set the table for 2004. And for some amazing careers that the guys have had since then, both nationally, representing Canada, and internationally when they've played for club teams. And we ended up coming from behind, keeping our composure throughout, and beating the U.S. in 2008 in the semifinal. And one of the things I've always loved, I use that game tape as a teaching tape for coaches, because what you watch is the way that group of guys would meet during a timeout in the first quarter. It was the exact same in double overtime. Absolute perfect composure all the way along. Absolute total focus. Tim already mentioned the importance of mental training. And this was a great example of a group of guys that were so completely focused on the moment, and they didn't get distracted by anything. And if anybody gets a chance to watch that tape, you can see that group of guys just quietly composed throughout. So those are just a couple, but there's so many. And I know Tim could talk for hours about some great examples of them.
For sure. And I interviewed on my channel, Cognizant Clay, for disability awareness. I interviewed Melanie and Brad Bowden, and they both said the same thing. It's not about winning. It's not about what place you finish. It's about the process and the people involved. And that's the one thing that I find really fascinating about athletes is, yeah, you're there to win. That's why you're playing, but that's not the main aspect of it. And it's just so great to hear both your perspectives saying it's the process. Yeah, we won gold, but here's some of the aspects that are big. And so my next question was, obviously, like you say, it's not about gold, but does each Paralympics and each World Championships do they each hold their own significance, or is it all very similar? Like how do you remember each one? Are they all different, or is it always similar?
Jim?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think they're all very, very different. They're all very, very special. The group that you have at that particular event, the group of players, the group of supporters back home, the staff, the coaches, that particular group is different in each one, and each group has its own, particular special characteristics. And, so it would take hours to sort of describe them all. But, I'll go to 96 in Atlanta, because that's when, Frog and I were together. Some of the things I remember from that, other than, waiting for hours for buses that were lost around the city of Atlanta. But, I remember Froggy, I don't know if he actually slept the entire time, because he was breaking down the videotape and then having it ready for us so that we could work together and plan the game plan for the next set of teams. And, I think, I sort of learned from that the importance of preparation. I mean, I always was a guy that believed in scouting, but, Frog took it to the next level. Like, it was so detailed and so specific to the plays and the individuals on the other teams. And so that was kind of cool. But what was even more sort of interesting, I think, during the 90s in our relationship was that Mike coached at University of Illinois as well. And through his coaching, coached pretty well the whole U.S. women's national team for quite a few years. And so they had the benefit of him on a daily basis for practice, whereas we only had the benefit on the occasional, camp that we were able to sort of cobble together. So from a technical standpoint, those teams were always pretty spectacular. And Ron Likens he's my favorite, international coach, really. I mean, him and Peter Core, I think, are two guys that I'll never forget, just because of their character. But, Ron was a brilliant and still is a brilliant coach. And so the challenge of that sort of international connection and, the competing interests at different times of the year was really exciting. So to win in Atlanta, against the home team, and then again winning in Australia against the home team, I mean, that's an incredible sort of feeling. But what you described earlier, Clayton, was what we called the paradox of peak performance. Like, in order to win the gold, you have to have a clear picture of what that looks like and feels like and smells like, etc., and sounds like. But then you have to forget about that and focus on the task at hand in the moment that is related to that goal.
Definitely very interesting. What about you, Mike? Is there any, are they different? Are they similar? Like, just expand on that a little bit if you can.
Well, for me, I was in different roles sort of all the time, and the team was in a different space. So each of the different Paralympics that I was fortunate to get to go to had its own distinct character. And I get a chance to reflect on that from time to time. I started journaling during the Paralympics in '92 to kind of capture the moment. And to Tim's point, the journal wasn't about the outcome. It was actually about everything that happened along the way. And very little of it is about the technical, tactical aspects of basketball. It's really more about the people. It's about the stories of the people and the story of the team. So each event has its distinct character. That's probably the best thing I would say about that. I'm reminded of a couple of things, actually. I think of Atlanta. I remember, Tim, when we were driving along one time, and we were in the bus, and the bus driver had a map, and he was driving along with the map on his steering wheel like this, and he was trying to read the map. He was one of the military guys brought in from outside to drive the buses during the games, and he's trying to hold it up and read it and everything, and all of a sudden it blows out the window. And he's like, says some colorful language and stuff like that, and he eventually navigated us and got us where we were going to go. But I'll never forget wondering, is he going to be able to get us to that spot or not? And then I remember when we finished up our practice, I think it was, and we weren't going to be able to get back in time to eat. I remember the one lady opened up the restaurant for us.
Yeah.
One of the locals, and I thought that was great. But those are kinds of things that all of the problems logistically in Atlanta opened it up for the character of the people that helped us out along the way. That those kinds of things really stood out, so that's, there's each games has its own character for that reason.
Definitely. And I think the geographical aspect alone is always so different. Like, I was talking about that with Brad and Melanie, them saying, like, everywhere is so different, and it's you want to see the city, but at the same time you're so focused on your team and your coaches and your families that are there with you. And it's just, I just find it so fascinating to hear all the different stories, because it's so much better than just the gold medal stories themselves. And that's one thing I've definitely noticed about athletes. And so for both of you, did you feel that any of those teams, there were people who didn't get enough credit, or was it always a group effort where everybody's equal? Like you mentioned the Champagne, was every meet like that, or were there some teams that maybe didn't gel as well as others?
Tim?
Well, gosh, I mean, that's there's a lot of teams and a lot of years and a lot of memories there to sort of recall and try to figure those things out. I think one of the things that we took pride in, I guess, as a program, and you know, that went right to where Reg was going as our leader in those early days, is that we need to spend a lot of time making sure that we thank and recognize and appreciate the support we get along the way, and recognizing that, you know, when we're on the court in the final game somewhere, you know, our little group is just the tip of the iceberg, and we wouldn't be there were it not for the tremendous contributions of so many people back home, not just friends and family, but other supporters within our sport and within the sports system in Canada. And we were lucky that the Canadian, the sports system in Canada embraced wheelchair basketball as one of the, if not the first sport to go into their new sort of national sport programs. So, you know, there's a series of sports centers across the country, and we were the first Paralympic sport to be sort of brought into the fold. And I think we did a pretty good job of showing our wares, but a large part of that was remembering the people at home and the people in the smallest, minutest little roles that supported us along the way. So, you know, it's impossible to give credit to everybody, but we sure did our best to do that.
Definitely. And what about you, Mike? Just what do you remember from that?
So one of the things that always struck me about the different teams that I got to be part of was how everybody was valued. Whether you were playing 35 minutes or 5 minutes, it was understood that those 5 minutes or those 35 minutes, they need to be your best, your very best, because without it being your best 35 or your best 5, we weren't going to be able to succeed. And so I was always struck by how everybody was valued on the team. There weren't, I once heard the expression, piano players and piano carriers. Everybody was valued. I loved Tim's comments about taking the time to say thank you to everybody. You know, I've had a chance to be around other countries in the world and things like this. And one of the things that always struck me was that when we were going to represent Canada, And I always really felt that everybody was behind us. Everybody was contributing, trying to find some way to help Canada be the best. And that didn't always show up in other countries. There were other countries that would be split. There would be a portion of the country that actually wanted to see their team fail because that was the portion that hadn't been selected. And I never felt that was the case in Canada. I always felt that everybody was trying to figure out how they could contribute to Canada's success. And to that point, it was really, really important that after we came back from the Paralympics and were given that privilege of representing Canada, that we made sure we went around to everybody back home who had helped us, whether it was a janitor that swept the floor in our gym, or our mom who was driving us to practice, or whomever, made sure that we took the time to really appreciate their contribution and thank them for it. Because without it, Canada wouldn't have been Canada through the 90s and the 2000s like it was.
Definitely. And like you say, it's for the country. It's for everybody. There's 20 million people, or whatever the population was at the time. Like, there's 20 million people on this team, and we're going to support every person in the country. And that's one thing I've always respected about Canadian, whether it's hockey, basketball, any sport. It's for the crest. It's for that logo on your flag, and that's the end of it. And it really is amazing what you can accomplish when everybody is so tight knit. And so one of the things I was really curious about, and this is also, all these are for both of you, but this one especially is, are there any teams you guys remember playing that were like almost intimidating? Like, who were some of the best teams you each faced as a coach?
Tim?
Well, I mean, obviously the team from USA was our nemesis. I mean, they were the gold standard, as it were, in terms of skills and tactics and strategies and coaching. I mean, every time we played them, no matter what the occasion, was a big deal. And I guess the Dutch team, the Australians, those teams, and the Germans, obviously, in the women's side, those were traditionally the top sort of group. Were always really intimidating, really big and strong, and it was kind of funny when we play basketball at home, and actually most of the times in our USA Canada games, the play was spirited and hard, but good and clean. And when we played some of the other countries around the world, it was a little bit tougher out there, a little bit scrappier, and that was a hard thing to come to grips with. That level of intensity was just absolutely out of this world, and it was tough. And those teams, those other teams in the world will do a lot of things to win that are edgy, and that was always a challenge to keep our keep that distraction, keep our focus on the moment, and not be distracted by some of those types of plays.
Definitely. And what about you, Mike? Any teams you remember that were always challenging?
The first thing I'd say is one of the things that always struck me is the relationships we had with so many players and coaches on other teams. I like to think that we had some really, really good relationships. And when I look at some people now, like I look at a Paul Bowes from our program who coached, who I got a chance to coach with during that time. Bowesy, he might know 50% of the players and coaches in the world, where he can, send a little text message or, whatever, and Facebook message and chat with them and go stay with them. So it's really, the relationships always stick out, but two teams in particular really stand out. First, the U.S. The U.S., on the men's side, they were the powerhouse really at the time, and they were particularly interesting for us because so many of our young players were going and playing college wheelchair basketball, and so they were seeing a lot of those U.S. players all through the winter season, and then we'd get together and represent each other's countries in the summer season. And so it was just constantly going up against them time and time again. There were no secrets. It was really going to be about who played the best. Nobody's going to come up with some secret trick or anything like that because we knew each other so well. The Australians, all through that, what I loved about the Australians, and it also drove me nuts, but what I loved is they fought. They came to do battle every single day, and they were going to fight the whole way. There was not going to be 1 second they would ever quit and let up, and that really pushed us. That pushed us to learn how to compete our very best. It was one of the things we had to overcome as a young team back in the mid 90s or late 90s. And then I guess I'd say one last thing that was really actually a lot of fun. The Dutch teams with Gert van der Linden and Koen Janssen on them. That was just a really, really smart group of players. Like they each understood their roles so perfectly, and they played them so perfectly together. You had to be really on mentally that day, or they would be able to take advantage of you. And so those are probably the teams that stood out for me during that time the most.
Yeah, like you say, there's so many memories, and it's hard. It's like you say, you can't think of anything right off the top, but USA, always USA. Like at any level, whether it's Paralympics, Olympics, it seems like USA is always the team to beat. And I don't know if, all the funding they have is just crazy. They have funding all day, and that's definitely hard to coach against. And for both of you as well, are there any notable players on the opposing teams that you guys remember? Like maybe give me a top 3 each of opposing players that were always on their A game and maybe some of the best in the world at the time.
Oh boy. I guess Maria from, I've forgotten her last name now, from the Netherlands. She was, I could just get lost watching her play sometimes. She was so skilled, so quick, such a good shooter, so shifty, such great court vision. And she was really our nemesis when we played the Dutch team every time round. And I guess for Australia, you look at someone like Liesl Tesch, who, was a one-woman wrecking crew. I think she leads the Paralympics to this day in steals and block shots. Just so very, very, very clever and high energy, spirited player, really tough to play against. And with the USA, they had so many great players over the years. I mean, I remember back to the early '90s, and Susie Hagel and her crew. They were all so good. But I think my favorite player was has to be Steph Wheeler. And she was she wasn't one of these big flashy sort of players, but man, she was tough. She was fundamentally sound. She was focused and intense. And since she's retired, I've really enjoyed following her coaching career too. And so those would be my picks. There's so many more, but obviously there's a few right there that stand out.
And Mike, what about you? What would your top three be?
Just like Tim, there's a lot of really, really good players that we got a chance to face. And saying these names doesn't diminish the contributions of like dozens of others. On the Australian team, they had this core group of guys throughout that time frame that we would repeatedly go up against, with Troy Sachs, Brad Ness, Justin Evison, and Sean Norris. And that made them super tough, but they had a whole group of guys that contributed alongside those guys. On the U.S., they started off, they were really led by Paul Schulte through a lot of that time, but they had some great players like Jeff Glassbrenner. Will Waller was part of those teams. There's a bunch of guys like that. I think to the Dutch, Gert Vanderland and Koen Janssen, that those are two of the greatest players of all time. In any conversation, they have to be there. But those are some of the guys that stand out for me. But there's so many more. There's this whole young generation now that's coming into the fold. There's guys like I watch. I love watching the British men's team right now with Phil and Harry Brown, and I actually loved watching George Bates at the World Championships. I just loved watching his game. There's a bunch of guys like that, young guys. Hiroaki Kozai from Japan, Steve Sirio from the U.S., and they've got a bunch of young guys, this young generation that's really a lot of fun to watch now. So there's a lot of really good basketball being played.
Definitely, and it's so hard in any sport to pick a top three. But Chris and I were both very interested to hear who you would have to say, and I'm so excited for the Paralympics next year because I was always into the Paralympics, obviously being disabled myself, but as I get older, I've really started to appreciate, like you say earlier, respecting the other teams, and the relationships are so good with the opposing teams now. Like, you can't escape it with social media and everything. And I think that mutual respect really brings some intense games that you just can't keep your eyes off of. And like you say, you can say all the best players, but the teams are the ones that are definitely, the things to look out for. So my next question is just a little bit of engagement between you two. And I guess we'll keep it going. Tim, I'll start with you and then we'll move on to Mike. What are some characteristics you guys admire about each other that you have noticed over the years of being friends and coaching together?
I think, one of the things that I, from a technical standpoint, I guess, in terms of coaching, that I think Mike has been the embodiment of is when he does some teaching on the court or when he's coaching, he keeps things down to like about usually about 3 key points. And, they're all really sort of interrelated and really applicable to the moment. And those key points might change. Well, they do change over time. But I think that's the greatest thing that we can sort of learn is, as coaches, we're always yipping and yapping, do this, try this, like there's a million things. And Mike does a great job of focusing on the key things, making sure those are in place before moving on to, to some other sort of areas. And, I think the other thing I've always enjoyed about Mike is, he's not, he doesn't take things personally. So, if you're going to have a discussion, like when we were coaching together or when we've worked together over the years on coaching clinics, we can be really frank with each other and get to the best possible answer for the players, without worrying about hurting somebody's feelings. And I really appreciate that and really, try to sort of be that way myself, so that if someone says something to me, it's not personal. It's just basketball, and let's look beyond whatever it sounded like or felt like, and get down to what's really good for the players. And so being, sort of player centered, I think is that characteristic of Mike's and being, like water off a duck's back, and you can yell at each other and it's no big deal. And I really appreciate that interaction.
Yeah, definitely. The constructive criticism, being able to throw suggestions out without, for lack of a better term, pissing the other person off, and that's always hard to do. What about you, Mike? What do you like about Tim?
Well, the first thing is like he taught me, and that doesn't always happen when you're a young coach coming up. A lot of times, veteran coaches they kind of punish you, to try to make you, go through the gauntlet, pay your dues, so to speak. Or they withhold information because they're concerned that you're going to be coming up through the ranks and you might replace them. And what I've seen this not just with myself, but I've seen Tim take the time with young coaches year after year after year to teach us. And what that's allowed, that's like having 50 Tims out there now instead of just one. And unfortunately, he's in Canada, so that means we got all these young Canadian coaches that have learned from him. So I think that's the first thing. He's always taken the time to teach us, and I've always appreciated that. I love the holistic way that he sees the game and everything, all the different parts inside of it, and how he looks at the whole person. I'll never forget, we got to Atlanta. We'd gotten into the dorms. We gotten settled in, everything like this. We gotten on the basketball court. We got back, and I'm a young coach. I'm chomping, ready to go. And Tim goes, "Okay, it's time for our 20-minute nap." And I was like, "What do you mean nap? I don't think, do coaches sleep?" He goes, "Bob, you gotta lay down. You may not fall asleep, but for 20 minutes, we're gonna relax. This is a marathon. This is a 10-day tournament, not a weekend tournament. It's time to relax." Climbed up to the top bunk, got in there, and he went to sleep for exactly 20 minutes. It was incredible. But it reminded me as I lay there wondering, how do I do this? Wide awake, I'd never napped like this. And it reminded me of the whole person. He was concerned about me being able to be the best I could be. And so that holistic view, the way he is so innovative. I watched him after each of his runs, the runs with those teams. And he was always thinking after that event was over, whether it was the Paralympics or World Championship, okay, what do we need to do to be better? And I was reminded of that, and I took that into all the teams that I coached. After that, I would ask myself at the end of the season, at the end of the quad, what do we need to do to be better? It wasn't thinking about being better than the other teams. It was being better than ourselves, because if we'd won a gold medal, we were the standard. We had to be better than ourselves. And that always took being innovative. And so those three things really stand out for me. It's how he taught me, his holistic view of us as more than just basketball players, but as people. And then the innovative way that he approached the game and reminded us to always look for a way to make the game and ourselves better.
Definitely. And all that talk reminds me of chess. You just have to be better. You have to think 6, 7 steps ahead to be able to be better than yourself and just be prepared. And this is all fascinating to me. And so thanks for your insight for both of you. It's definitely an interesting perspective. Being a fan, and being a disabled fan, I often enjoy the coaches more because I've never been able to play. So I analyze the whole sport, and it's so hard even just watching a game to analyze it, let alone doing it in the moment, live in person. So it's definitely fascinating. And so just to wrap up for both of you, how would you want you and your team's contributions to be remembered for the current generation and the upcoming generations? What would you want them to learn from the whole experience that you guys went through?
Oh, wow. That is one tough question. I think, for all the successes, and we had a few down moments as well over the years. I'm pretty proud to say that, in I forget how many it is now, 10 or 11 sort of final appearances, we really had probably only, one, maybe two sort of substandard performances where we didn't sort of play our best ever. And, I guess that's what, it would be great to be remembered that we were a family that when our best was needed, we were able to produce it as a family, as a group. Each event had a different hero. The person who was the best player or made the difference, the tournament before was not the same one that made the difference the next tournament. So, everybody really is really important. And as Mike said, everyone's really valued. And so hopefully we'll be remembered for that incredible length of time. And it continues to this day. Obviously, the women's team having won on home soil was in 2014 with Bill and Michael coaching for me, that was a thrill of a lifetime because it was Marnie and I, in the broadcast booth right beside the bench, or watching it happen. And so we got to live vicariously through them. And that was that same thing. It was a family affair where it was a different hero every game and or a different set of heroes every game. And so hopefully that's how we'll be remembered, the importance of putting things aside. It's not about your stats and so on. It's about how well the team performs at the end of the day, and we all get the same gold medal, or at least as a player we do. So hopefully that's it.
Definitely. And I think you'll be remembered for a long time. I'm pretty impressed by your resume, both of you. So what about you, Mike? What do you think? What do you hope people remember by you guys?
Well, I think I hope that because of the group of guys that I got a chance to be part of, and obviously the women that I got to also be part of, I hope that the relationships, not just amongst themselves like Tim mentioned, but we had some great relationships with players from other teams. And that's one of the great things about Olympic and Paralympic sport is it's about those relationships. Those are so important. I hope that that the players and coaches, the lessons that we all learned through those various Paralympics, we're carrying over into other parts of our lives, so that the pinnacle of our life is not an Olympic or Paralympic gold medal. The pinnacle of our life comes later through the lessons we've learned from sport. And then the last thing I hope that in some small way that we've been able to give back to the sport in a way that sets the table for the next generation. We were so very, very fortunate to have opportunities that I know the generations before us didn't have, but we had our opportunities because of the things that the guys and ladies did before us. We've mentioned Reg McClellan a couple times here. Reg, set the table and did so much so that we could have opportunities through the 90s and the 2000s. And so I hope that we were able to give back to this sport in a way that says, "Thank you, Reg, for giving us this opportunity."
Definitely. Those are some good words. Well, on behalf of the Burlington Vipers, guys, thank you so much for taking part in episode 1 of the Viper Pit. It was great, and we'll get a link out to you when it's posted for sure.
Thanks
All
very
right.
much.
Thanks a lot, Clayton. And thanks, Mike.
Well, it was a lot of fun, Tim. Always
Yeah,
a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was great, guys. Well, take care, and thanks again. We really do appreciate it.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Take care.